Wealth Money Radio Show, brought to you by wealthmoney.org. Byron Dale and Greg Soderberg are your hosts. This is the only program that addresses the destructive consequences of using a debt money system. Financial slavery is the verdict when all money is created and put into circulation through loans. How interest grows the debt, but not the money supply, and the effects that interest and debt has on our lives. If you would like to join the program and have a question or a comment, please call 347-884-9499. That's 347-884-9499. And now your host, Byron Dale.
Hey everybody, this is David in Selleryville, Ohio. I'll be hosting the show today. Today's guest is Anthony Migchels. He's a blogger from the Netherlands. It's going to probably be a couple minutes before he gets on the air. He'll be using Skype and the network we use. You can't get in to call us on Skype until after the show has begun. So the show has begun, so we'll be expecting Anthony here momentarily. I'll take a couple minutes to give a little background on Anthony. I'm sure he'll have something to say when he first comes on too, but like I said, he's a blogger from the Netherlands, and he is a adamant opposer to any type of usury whatsoever, and is pushing that in just about all of his writings. Anthony is very receptive to anything that gets his means to an end, including full reserve banking, debt-free money, and all the stuff that we've been advocating. So I would imagine that and it should be a good call and a lot of agreement today. Let's see. The reason I wanted to get Anthony on was there's been a lot of rabbit holes that I've been going down over the last few months. A lot of them keep sending me to the German economy in the 1930s and how they were able to accomplish this. And hopefully, and the only real documentation of any discussion I found was on Anthony's blogs. So that's why I wanted to get him on. He seems to be very knowledgeable of the subject. And told him that that's what I wanted to talk about, and he's in full agreement to do this. So it'll be real interesting to hear what he has to say on that subject. So,
and when you're talking about that, Dave, you're talking about how they went from pretty near a broke country to a world power in just a couple of years, right?
Yeah, unemployment was 7 million, and that was reduced to half of that within a year, and completely gone within 2 years. This is a lot of debate going on the Facebook and Twitter, and of course the blogs that are out there, and there's a lot of discussion, a lot of arguing on it. And the thing that I came across was something that I've sent you guys. It's called labor treasury certificates, and I had several months ago we had a vice president from the Bank of America on, and he had hinted to those when he was on the show, and a guy by the name of Bruce King, when I was up in Idaho, we got Bruce King on the air, and I had called Bruce King, and I had talked to him about it, and yes, indeed, he was very well aware of the labor treasury certificates, tried to get Bruce, he'd probably come back on the show again, and he explained to me that Bruce was way ahead of his time, or that Germany was way ahead of their time, and that the labor treasury certificates were actually put as a credit right into your account. And Anthony is on the air now.
Your guest is on the show.
Yeah, I just clicked
in. Your guest is on the show.
Anthony, this is David. I'm going to be hosting the show. Greg and Byron are going to stay in the background and listen in and have questions for you. I was giving some background on the real currencies, but I'm sure you could do a lot better job than that. If you could give us a little background on yourself and real currencies, I'd appreciate it. Go ahead, Anthony.
Well, David, good evening. Can you hear me to begin with?
Yeah.
Excellent. So, okay, I was a little anxious there that things were going all right, but well, thank you so much for having me, and I'm looking forward to discuss these matters. I don't think I really completely heard what you were just saying about the German situation, David. There, can you rephrase the question for me, please?
Well, we were. My interest was that how did the country of Germany, the Weimar Republic, getting ready to declare bankruptcy for the entire state, and then in a matter of just a couple of years was able to eliminate their unemployment and become a world power. Do you have some background on that you can let us on?
Absolutely. I did a series of articles on the German monetary system 2 years ago, Hitler's finances, and the main gist of the article basically, well, let me put it this way, because for years people have been wondering about this. How did Hitler pull it off? And Germany was a complete mess in 1933 when he came to power, and indeed, within a few years, Germany had full employment again, a booming economy, public works were being financed, apparently without much trouble, building first the autobahns and the Tempelhof Airport and a number of other prestigious and very important infrastructure projects. And there's been a lot of speculation about the German monetary system in the alternative media. Lately, because of revisionism, Hitler has had a bit of a revival, and and his reputation has improved a lot because revisionism has exposed that what we consider a history about the Second World War is basically just Allied and Russian and Jewish Agitprop, wartime Agitprop, and absolutely not in any way a serious appraisal of who Hitler was, and this economic, well, it was like Germany rise from the ashes like a phoenix, and a proper explanation for this is necessary. And there has been speculation that Hitler was a complete monetary reformer breakaway, and that he ditched the banks. That you were talking a little bit about labor certificates there, and that this was what really financed the economy. And my research has shown that this is not really the case. What really happened in Germany was that Hitler actually took over the basic monetary system that was in place under Weimar, and the Reichsmark, which was used to be as a currency in Germany at the time. The Reichsmark in the Third Reich was the same as the Reichsmark of the Weimar Republic, and what actually transpired in the German economy is actually not complicated at all. I mean, with hindsight, what happened is that Schacht was appointed president of the Reichsbank in March 1933, and Schacht was a very experienced banker who had already headed the Reichsbank in the 20s. In the aftermath of the Great Inflation, and what Schacht did, besides he basically let the monetary system in place, including the banks and fractional reserve lending at interest, and the banks remained in the same hands, although the management was rid of Jews, but the ownership remained the same. And but what Schacht did is that he solved the deflation that was the Great Depression. And this is a key point to understand. I hope that we can elaborate on it a little bit later. But the Great Depression, as any other depression, including today's depression, is caused by deflation and a lack of credit and money in the economy. And this Schacht solved by creating what is called the MIFO bills, which is a shorthand for a big German phrase, the Metall. Gestalt, etc. Let me look it up here for you for the exact name of the whole thing. But these were basically bills of exchange, which existed only in in bookkeeping form, and which circulated between the banking industry, the state, and German industry, and mainly weapons industry, but also industry in the wider sense, but big business. This is not about small business. Or a normal German would never get in touch with these bills of exchange. It was purely between the big players in the economy, and this extra liquidity solved the deflation in the economy and financed the German build-up. First public works, but from 1935 on, mainly the rebuilding of the army, and this basically massively stimulated the economy, and this explains to a T why Germany was re-established as a great power within a few years. And it's a very important historical lesson, and it's a really very important story. It's important because it shows how easy it is, even within the current monetary system that we have today, how easy it is to solve a deflation as we had. Even today, central banks could easily finance some public works for the state in several ways, but they just refuse to do it because they are causing these deflations on purpose for their own agenda. But if they want, they can solve them easily, as Schacht did in the 30s. But what did not transpire, and this is also very important, what did not transpire is that Adolf Hitler did not reform the monetary system in any real meaningful way, and he continued the banking system as said, and he maintained a substantial and really very sizable national debt, up to 18 billion in 1938, which was I'm not really sure about the percentage of GDP that represented at the time, but it must have been quite a substantial sum, and the banks were raking in a few billion per year in interest over this national debt, and also over the bills of exchange that Schacht circulated, which amounted to about 12 billion at its peak.
Well, do you have any idea what rate of interest it was at that time after they did that?
Yeah, the MIFO bills, they came at 4%, and 4% was also the legal maximum interest rate in the Weimar at the time, which Hitler took over and never changed. And I think the national debt was serviced with a similar percentage.
Oh, well, what exactly are the labor treasury certificates? Do they even exist? I've seen you talk about them several times.
They are pure bookkeeping, and these things are created purely by bookkeeping, double entry bookkeeping, in which double entry bookkeeping comes with debit and credit automatically, and this is how it's done. And they were spent into circulation by Schacht. And he would pay the industrial output of Germany's industry, and then they could pay each other with these things, and they could also pay off the bank with MIFO bills, and these banks could then ultimately exchange them back to Reichsmark via Schacht and the central bank, the Reichsbank. And all this was kept on the books of the. Let me see what these things were called again, because.
Well, if they were spent into circulation, that sounds like debt-free money to me. But you're saying
it was spent into circulation just as a treasury is spent into circulation after it has been monetized on the international capital markets. So It was absolutely not debt-free, and ultimately the Reichsbank had to exchange any MIFO bills that were offered for exchange for convertibility to the Reichsbank by either industry or the banks. The Reichsbank promised to pay in Reichsmark for them, but because they came with 4% interest, the banks basically held on to them because they were making a nice return.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, it was just like it is now. The government borrows the money, and then they spend it after that.
Yes.
Yep.
Absolutely. And the entire monetary system in Germany, the banking system, what Schacht did, and this was a firm policy and a very state central policy. The credit markets were completely usurped by the state, and Schacht made sure that the credit markets were inaccessible to either small and medium business and also to big business. Big business was in several other ways incentivized to self-finance, and they could do this because they were making massive profits at the time. And all the credit that was offered at the credit markets, either by individuals or by the banks, was all borrowed by the state.
Go ahead,
So,
David, if you got anything.
When you talk, I've heard you talk before about the usury in Europe. There was a lot of monetary reform talk in Europe.
Yes, absolutely.
Before World War I and before World War II, and sorry, my dogs are going crazy. Somebody's attacking me. There's a squirrel outside, one of the two. And you were saying that World War I basically eliminated the talk of monetary reform, and World War II basically solidified any talk of monetary reform, and that usury would be was implemented or in stone. Can you go over that a little bit for us? Yeah.
It was especially after the First World War, and in the 20s you had Major Douglas, for instance. You had people like Arthur Kitson. Arthur Kitson actually was a very important man, and he was the I think the most advanced of all these men. You had Soddy, of course, also a very influential thinker, and the level of talk about monetary reform, and especially also during the Great Depression, was intense, and not just in Europe, but also very much in the United States. It goes as far as it's even fair to say that people were simply discussing monetary reform. Normal people, basically what you would call uneducated people, they would be discussing monetary reform on the streets and in the pubs, and because everybody realized at the time that the banks were at the heart of the Great Depression, which was, especially in the United States, but also in Europe, was really literally killing people. People were starving in the streets at the time, and there was a huge power struggle in society all over the West between the debt slaves, the mass masses, and the bankers. And Hitler himself in the 20s, he came to power based basically on the economic program of George Bader. And this man was he had a great vision about how usury and international finance capitalism was the heart of the Jewish question, and the most the most important issue of that time and of all time, basically, and not so much the racial issue of the Jews, but their financial domination. And okay, you can discuss whether banking is indeed completely Jewish. I would say it's a combination of Gentile and Jewish financiers, but usury and Jewish usury obviously has been a huge issue throughout Western civilization for literally 1,500 years, 2,000 years, and was already a big issue in the Roman Empire. And Fader, he had a very clear program of migration to an interest-free economy and the breaking of the shackles of interest slavery, and that was really a program that brought Hitler to power. But when he did come to power, he did not really reform the monetary system after all.
That sounds like all the politicians in the United States. They say they're going to do something, but after they get elected, they do something different.
Well, it does sound like that, and it is like that, and I think it's really a very important lesson also for many people who are very much swayed by revisionism these days. Hitler has been completely demonized by the Allies, and it's ridiculous, and the Germans have been given a very raw deal after the war, a very raw deal indeed, and this must be cleared, and this is a vital part of modern and contemporary history, and it must be exposed. But on the other hand, the revisionists go overboard, and they idealize Hitler, and they make him out to be some sort of a populist hero that was purely working selflessly for the German people, and that he basically did nothing wrong, and that the whole war was the fault of the Jews and the Russians and the British, and that is absolutely untrue. Also, just as much as the Allied propaganda is untrue.
Now you talk about Feder and Schock. my understanding was that Feder was, a mentor to Hitler, but then Feder kind of fell out of grace with Hitler later on. Is that when there was a transformation to what Schacht wanted to do as opposed to what Feder wanted to do?
It was really a very important issue because Feder and Schacht, they were sworn enemies, and especially Schacht, he despised Feder, and clearly, and he left this in his memoirs, he absolutely wanted to avoid that Feder would be in the position to do anything to manifest any of his plans, and he succeeded in this. And Schacht represented big business and the money power in Germany. There can be absolutely no doubt about that. He was a Mason, and he was a lifelong friend of Montague. Norman was the BOE chief at the time, and he was a founding member of the Bank of International Settlements, and he was absolutely a high lieutenant of the money power, and he hated Feder. And Feder himself was, like you said, a mentor to Hitler, and Hitler himself in Mein Kampf says that that Feder, opened him up to the whole finance capitalism issue that that he was railing against, and but when the time came, and this when the National Socialists came close to power, Hitler's industrial backers, they basically forced him to sideline Feder, and this happened already, I think, in 1931. And it became clear right after Hitler rose to power in 1933, and when he gave Schacht really a very junior position in the administration, while he gave Feder a very junior position in the administration, while Schacht was given the Reichsbank, which was the second position in the Reich.
Yeah. Now we in some of your writings you go over that usury is the number one problem, and the problem we've had Europeans on the show before, and of course from our stuff that we're for debt-free money, and the problem we have with Europeans is you guys have to go after the head of the snake. You have to go right to the top, and in the United States. We have a dual banking system. We can have state-chartered banks along with the federal bank. And, of course, what we're proposing is to incorporate debt-free money at a state level, as opposed to, Byron and Greg have been walking the halls of Congress for decades, and it's very hard to get anything done when you're, strictly going at the top, which is why we're concentrating on a state bank, which is possible to do, if Scotland would have broken away, or as looks like what Iceland is trying to do. Are you aware of the dual banking system we have in the United States and how debt-free money could work that way, or do you oppose that, or what do you think?
Listen. I have very mixed feelings about this, because I obviously very much admire anybody who is really involved in monetary reform, and debt-free money obviously would be a big improvement. And in my writing, I usually write that what I basically say is that debt-free money, with the government spending it into circulation, would be the least of the, for me, acceptable solutions to get going. Because I absolutely do not want to alienate any people when I take a hard line on these matters, and I do take a very hard line on these matters. And the reason why I do this is because I see the money power and the banking industry as really the core of the whole issue. People talk about the New World Order, this and that, and they talk about all sorts of spooky conspiracies, but they overlook that people go to work to pay off the bank, and we are slaves to the banking industry. And the banking industry owns all the big business, because that is something that people don't understand. Banking is a cartel, and this cartel owns all other cartels. So we are complete slaves to one massive, huge capitalist cartel, which is completely international, and this is another major issue. I mean, it's a mistake, in my view, a big mistake, to focus solely on, of course, every nation must fend for himself, and it's clear that in America, America is obviously the main place of contention for people living there. That's obvious. But we must understand that the money power, the banking cartel, is completely global, and especially in the West. I mean, there can be absolutely no doubt that it's just one monolithic block, and this we must keep in mind. And this is such a huge power that we must take a completely uncompromising line, in my view, and at least so at the analytical level. If you analyze the problem of money, then you must go all the way, and you must develop the best theory of money that is possible. You must completely understand the money situation, including the all-important credit situation, because that is yet another important issue. The people look at monetary reform, but they tend to forget credit, and credit is even more important than money, I dare say, because there's much more credit than money in circulation. And the problem of credit must be solved in any comprehensive monetary reform solution. So I'm sympathetic towards that free money. It is definitely a big step in the right direction. But in my own work, I do take a staunch line in these matters. Obviously, when you are campaigning for things, that's grand, and I'm all for you and more power to you. But in analytical and in my own solutions, in my own proposed solutions, I simply go further and state interest-free credit must be the basis for any monetary system that is really going to work in the long run. Because ultimately, it's not about the state. It's not about the national debt. It is about the debt of common people. It is about the 40% of cost for capital that is being passed on in prices without us even realizing that 40% of everything that we pay goes directly to the bank because producers need credit to produce in the economy. And this must be solved before we can really speak of an end of the New World Order and financial tyranny.
Well,
I'd like to enter here a minute, if you don't mind, David, and because I'd like to address that very issue, because we agree with about 90% of what you say, and of course, what we believe, and of course, we have a two-pronged thing, because first place, you got to get some people believe, and a lot of people believe, that you don't need debt to create money. You don't need any loans, period. And especially in the United States, where it clearly, under our Constitution, gives the federal government, the federal Congress, authority to create the money, and obviously you should spend it in. And of course, you must do that and get a lot of money in circulation to replace the credit before you try to stop that. Because you can't do anything in a vacuum. I mean, there's no way you can just go say, okay, we're going to stop this and do that. That's clearly not even feasible. But if you would start that and creating that money into circulation as a payment for building their infrastructure, basically kind of what Hitler did, only we would then have not controlled by the federal government, but it would be controlled by the towns and states and the counties in America, because each one of them has its separate needs for the transportation system. And our transportation system is really, really bad if you look at it overall picture. So what you do and it wouldn't make any difference whether you started at the state level, which we can do in this country, because we have not state-owned banks, but we have state-chartered banks that is controlled by state law. So you could pass a law that requires the banks to just spend that money into circulation to do these things, and all it would do would be a state law, and of course it would only go in that state, but the money would be created exactly like it is now, just a bookkeeping entry and put into circulation, so nobody would be able to tell it. That money would move around just like it does now, and nobody would know if it was created as a payment or created as a debt, except you would get rid of the usury. There would be no usury. If you have no debt, you don't have to worry about having any usury. I mean, it's all gone. So then you could do it on the federal level the same way. First, you start putting that money into circulation, and you rebuild the country, especially the water system and the transportation systems, and then you get a lot of money into circulation. Then you can begin to shut down the credit system, because you don't need it anymore, because there's plenty of money out there. And what you said is absolutely true. The amount of credit out there is way beyond the amount of any other kind of money. And, of course, there's only, in the United States, which I'm much more familiar with, I'm not going to talk about any European countries, but all our money, 100% of it, is put into circulation as a debt. Now, yes, the government does print some money, but they sell it to the banks for the cost of printing and then borrow it back to spend it. And that's what the people do. They have to borrow the money from the banks first before they can even get that currency into circulation, because you have to borrow the money and have some money in your checking account and then go to the bank and buy the currency with that. And then coins work the same way. Now, the government mints the coins, but they don't spend them. They sell them to the banking system. And we've only had one illustration of the difference of that I've ever been able to find in the United States, because we used to have a coin that was the size of a quarter and looked like a quarter, but it was $1. And of course, people got them so confused they didn't like them, and pretty quick the banks didn't want to have them, and the people didn't have them, and there was a huge amount of. I used to have the actual amount of dollars that set back there because nobody wanted to use them. Well, then they decided that we would do it different. We'd put in coins that looked like gold. They had a brass color, so. Because even though they was the same size and weight as the Susan B. Anthony, they were a gold color, so it was easy to tell the difference. So that you solved that problem. The problem is the banks didn't want them because they wasn't sure that people would want to use them. But the government minted them, and they wanted them out there, so they finally made a deal with Walmart that they would put them in through Walmart. Now, I don't know. I've never been able to find exactly how that worked. The Treasury wrote and told me basically how it worked, but they didn't say just exactly how. Walmart got them. They put them through Walmart, and then Walmart would give them to you in change and stuff like that, so they went into circulation. And I know this personally because when I first heard about them, I went to the bank and asked them for some of them, and they said, well, we don't handle them. We didn't think they would work, and we don't handle them. But if you really want some, it's our understanding you can go to Walmart and get some. So I did, and I got some. Then I wrote a letter to the Treasury and asked them. They said, yeah, on that situation, we took Walmart and some other companies, too, that nobody ever put a name to, but they didn't say, I'm assuming, they didn't say that, but they, sold them to the banks for a discount of some sort, to the stores as kind of a discount, and then they used them as face value when they put them into circulation. And eventually enough of them got into circulation that the banks began to handle them. And now you can go to the banks and you can get them. You have to, of course, take some other form of money there to get them. You got to take a bunch of coins in, and I sometimes do that. All my pennies and anything smaller than a quarter, I kind of just throw aside. And then when they get some, a certain amount of those, I take them into the bank and turn them into the dollar coins. And you used to be able to get just one or the other, but now they kind of come in a package and you just get what you want. And then, too, we have a light rail, only it's not light, but we have a rail system in the Minneapolis area. And Greg and I and our wives, we went down, used it, and went down to watch a baseball game. And Greg's wife, she didn't have any of the correct change, and so she just gave them the bills, and of course the change come in all them coins. And it tickled me so because everybody, when they come out of that machine, they look back and they didn't know what to do, and the woman repeated over and over again, don't worry about it, those are real money, just take them up and go ahead and use them however, they're real money. And she said that over and over again, and so it was really kind of cute for me to watch that. So then Carrie got them, and later we stopped on the way down, and we had a hamburger at a place that's really neat, and so we was talking about it, and I told Carrie, well, the first thing you want to do is get rid of them Susan B. Anthony's, because if you're not careful, you'll end up spending them as quarters because they won't look like dollars. And if you do that right away, then obviously you will. You got another caller there, David, and then the others don't make so much difference because you'll always know they're dollars when you see the color of them. So what we propose, again, is the government starts spending that money in until we get a lot of money in circulation. Then we can begin to shut down the fractional reserve system. And, of course, it has to be done when you do it, you have to do it at the state level and the federal level. Now, in the United States, we've had 2 times when presidents refused to renew the charter of the banks, of the national banks. They've never touched the state banks. And each time they never put any other kind of system into. I mean, they never put any other kind of money into circulation. So the state banks just sprung up each time and created lots of money as evidence of debt and put them into circulation. And they were supposed to be all backed by gold, but hardly of them ever had more than 18% of the gold they needed to back their coins. So, obviously that didn't really amount to anything. They just did that, and some banks was able to keep, at a certain value, and others didn't. So there was a lot of confusion about that. And that's been the problem, because nobody's offered any kind of a plan until we come along how they could put this debt-free money into circulation first over a period of time to get enough of it in so you wouldn't need the credit. And, of course, then you could start eliminating the credit, and then it's very clear that you could write off all the bank debt because they didn't loan anything except just your imagination and some numbers they put in the account. And I have letters from the Library of Congress that says, well, money is created when a loan is made and debt's incurred, and money is extinguished when loan is repaid, so they wouldn't get the benefit of the principal anyway. They just destroy that. The only benefit they get is the interest. So there'd be an easy way to do that. You could get rid of a tremendous lot of the debt. And I also have letters from the Treasury that says if you got rid of the Federal Reserve Act, and repealed that act, all the assets of all the national banks would go to the government. So then, it wouldn't be nothing to get rid of the government debt, because if you owe yourself, you can just write off the debt, and that's the end of it. And, of course, the bigger problem, as you stated clearly, was the private debt. Now I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah. I don't want to break up your narrative there, Byron, but the problem is that if you just cancel all the debt, if you go into a bank and just close the bank and say, well, you just printed the money anyway, all the debt is now canceled, somebody will be holding that money that is representing somebody else's debt. So if you cancel the debt, then you also destroy the money that somebody else is holding. And
well, not necessarily. Now, you have to think about that.
It would just stay in circulation.
That money would simply stay in circulation. Now, if you didn't cancel the checking accounts, that money would stay in circulation. The money would stay in circulation. The debt would not.
Okay, that's another option indeed. That you don't cancel the money, but you do cancel the debt, and then.
Well, absolutely, because you wouldn't cancel all the checking accounts. You just cancel the IOU you have to owe the bank. And you wouldn't want to do that between individuals, because if I loaned you some money, obviously when you pay me back, I get the benefit of the principal back. But when the banks get paid, they don't get the benefit of the principal. So that's nothing to worry about. But you do not cancel the checking accounts. And we have a way that we think we should do that, too, because remember, we are in the United States, and we're different because we have a Constitution that set out things. And the Constitution, our Constitution says Congress shall create the money. They use the word coin, but if you look that up as a verb, it clearly means to create, and I can go through a lot of that to prove that's true, but that's neither here nor there. And then they was also provide for post offices and post roads. So what we kind of think is we ought to eliminate the bank completely. I mean, they shouldn't even exist, but all that should move into the post office service, so they would do the same services of moving checkbook money and all that, because we're not opposed to checkbook money in any way except the debt on it. When you eliminate the debt, you eliminate all interest. You don't have to worry about it. So, but if you do that, you have to have money in circulation for people to work with. And if you don't get rid of the money supply, but you get rid of the debt, then you can begin to do this. And then, of course, there gets to be a point in time you have to start taking away all this property that the banking system has stolen. For example, in the 80s in the United States, they just simply wiped out farm families and took all and raised the interest to 19 to 21%, and then quit making them loans. And of course, then they just folded, and then in a few years, that all that land went into the hands just of a few people. It used to be when I was a kid, everybody had a farm that was about a section or two or three, and a few ranchers were bigger than that. And after that, then now the bulk of the farms are 50 to 100,000 acres. And so you see what happened. And, of course, eventually that has to be taken away from them, too. I went through this with a guy at work, and he said, well, you can't take from the rich and give to the poor. And I said, no, but you can take from people who steal things and give it back to the ones that didn't. So I went through an illustration. I said, now you come into my place and you steal everything I got, and I wasn't home. I didn't know it, didn't know anything about it. But a friend happened, or somebody else happened to see you and reported you got caught. Now I said, would you get to keep all that property? Would it be returned? Well, he said, no, I wouldn't get to keep it. Well, and see, that's the process about this whole thing. When these guys steal this money, then it should be returned. And when they stole this property, it should be returned. And, of course, it may be impossible to return it all to the same families that had it. That might take a little work, but we don't have to worry about trying to figure that all out till we get a way to implement it in the first place. Now I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, no, that's just great to hear, because what's important here is that we're establishing that we feel the same about the completely ravenous nature of these banks and their owners, and that we absolutely need to claw back what they indeed stole, because it's all theft, all these silly con games of them, and it all springs from usury on stupid debt, and then that's the basic theft. But all the other games that they play with, their derivatives and their artificial boom and bust cycles and what have you, and clawing all that back and replacing it with a decent system, that should be the goal. And it's good to hear that you guys are, that you have the same strong feelings about that as I do, because I'm very much with you there. And what remains is then discussing how it all should be done. And in my view, in a modern economy, it will be very difficult to come around without a decent credit system. And there are a number of issues. For instance, you can think of business loans for a small and medium business. There will always be a desire or a need for credit there. And if you don't have a process in place to create interest-free credit for legitimate loans like that, what you will then have is that the rich will start lending at interest again, and that will create this a new compound interest spiral that will ultimately, not within a few years, but ultimately will gobble up everything up, just as the banking industry has today gobbled everything up.
Well, not necessarily, because now let's think about that. Because if you outlaw interest and you uphold your laws, now you may not stop it all, but it's going to be a lot easier to stop that than anything else. Because that's all really obviously very easy to see who has who and where it moves from. So if you got to remember that interest increases the debt without the money supply. So you clearly see that, and that'd be a lot easier to stop than having anti-drug laws and all this kind of stuff and speeding limits, because you can't see them all. But this is pretty obvious. There's no way to really hide this, that whether you're paying interest or not, if you want to look for it. But again, the question is if you're going to enforce laws or not. And of course, in America now, under Obama, we don't enforce very many laws, except the ones that he wants, and the rest of them, he said, I ain't going to pay attention to that, like the immigration system and stuff. That clearly, the laws are one thing, and he doesn't just do absolutely the opposite. But that's neither here nor there. Now, I want to stop a minute, Larry, because we have here a Larry that has a comment. I'm going to, if that's okay with everybody, I'm going to bring him in and see what his comment is. Oh, you there, Larry?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you. Good morning, gentlemen. Anthony, it's a pleasure to talk to you. I'm a regular contributor to your blog, and really appreciate your work and the fine work Byron does. Had a quick comment for you, first of all, regarding the National Socialist in Germany. There's no doubt that Federer was the philosophical economist that helped bring the National Socialists to power. And I think that you're correct, Anthony, in saying that a lot of his ideas were not fully implemented. I think there was one of his programs that were implemented, and that was in building the Autobahn. And Germany directly created treasury notes. They did not do it through a bank. They directly did it only for the Autobahn. And they put money into circulation. It was interest-bearing, but that went back to the government. You could use those treasuries as currency or to pay taxes. So effectively, they did directly issue some currency. And a subtle but real big difference with that And what was taking place in the United States under the New Deal is that in the United States, the government chose to borrow money from the banks. So the banks prospered in bringing money into circulation. In this went a long way. The Autobahn was quickly completed. The United States modeled their highway system after it. But while I agree with you that Hitler did not fully implement sovereign currency, I think that he did in part.
Yeah, well, okay. You'd have to, I stand with what I said. I can't vouch for exactly what financed the Autobahn in the early stages of the regime, but most of the actual liquidity that Schaff provided the economy with, that was the MIFO bills, as I laid out earlier, and they came at 4%. And the main thing is that credit was not available for the common man. There was no way for small and medium business to get interest-free credit in any way, or people would still be going to a bank for a mortgage, although there would be little credit available because the government was usurping it all. So, and the key issue in my work is I try to bring down economic power. I try to decentralize it to the common man and not to the state. And National Socialism was a very statist kind of operation, and it was, ostensibly for the good of the common man. The bottom line was that the common man was working as a wage slave in the arms industry first, and then later conservative control.
It sounds like he's breaking up a little. Okay, now I think he's back. Go ahead.
You back, Anthony?
Oh, was I falling away?
Yeah, no, your Skype was just breaking up.
For a little bit, Anthony, your Skype was breaking up, but you're back good and solid now.
Okay. So the bottom line should be in what I aim for in monetary reform is really to decentralize real economic power, and that the common man has access to what he needs to finance his own existence, and that includes credit for business loans, but also if necessary for mortgage, etc. Without usury, because that is the main issue. And I do agree that if you create a debt-free money-based supply, to get back to where we were going earlier in the conversation, I think that the need for credit would be much lower, because it's obvious and clear that the economy is really suffering from money scarcity, and if you provide an abundant money supply, then money scarcity would definitely decline. But if you do not solve the credit issue, then that would ultimately lead to an ever increasing drain through interest again, through compound interest. And you say, Byron, you said earlier, I want to outlaw usury. I've never been a great fan of that, because I'm not so sure if it would be very feasible to uphold these laws. I think it would be very difficult in many situations, and practice has shown this also during the usury prohibition in Europe, and why not just at 0% credit? Why not? I mean, we have every tool available, and credit is, I think, necessary in a modern economy. It has shown to be necessary in the medieval economy, because it was lack of credit that ultimately brought back usury. And if we can simply solve the credit issue by providing it at 0%, then why not?
Well, if you just create money as a payment, you automatically put interest to zero, and there's nothing to charge interest on. So, and if it's against the law to have interest, well, then any contract that had it, or any kind of an agreement that had it, would be a violation of the law. Wouldn't be enforceable. That's very easy to take care of that if you have a nation of laws. See, that's what separates America, because we're supposed to have a nation of laws, not of judges that make up the law like they do now, but laws that everybody, and not laws that 20,000 pages long, but a short law that you can understand, and so that everybody can understand the laws. And it's also, if you read the Constitution, and the first thing it says that this was formed for the benefit of the people, not for the benefit of special groups or anything else. And getting back, if you're going to make the loans, who's going to decide who gets a loan or not? If I can get a loan and Greg can't, I guarantee you I'm going to do better than he can, because I'll have more stuff to work with, more stuff to actually make a profit on. Now I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, the credit application is a real issue because sorry, am I interrupting someone? But the credit, yeah.
Anthony, this is Greg. I'd like to address your concern about having money for businesses and stuff. You know, if you're creating money debt-free with the increase in production, people would have money without being in debt. You know, eventually you'd lower the cost of living because you'd have the debt going out of the system, and people would have savings. And what you could do, since there'd be, interest would be illegal, you could still have loans, and the bank or someone could be the intermediary between a borrower and a lender, but the bank wouldn't create the money. The bank would simply get with someone who had money and see if they'd want to agree to make a loan to somebody who did not, and then the bank would charge a one-time fee, just like a real estate realtor does when they sell a house. And, and then that would work, and you could have credit available, but it wouldn't be money created as a loan. It would be money that came into circulation debt-free. The other thing is that, in America, we'd like to get this thing started because, well, we thought we were free people, and we think we want to be free people, at least I do. And you cannot be free if you have to borrow your money. Even if the lender or the creator does not charge interest, I'm still in servitude to him to get the money. And so, the money has to come into circulation debt-free as an evidence of our production.
Yeah, but I hear what you say about that you can create a financial institution that simply pools savings and that can give interest-free loans with saved money that was created debt-free. But then you go on to say, but if there is a debt, then there is slavery, and this is then this is contradictory to each other. And I want to react to this idea that debt is slavery, because I do agree, obviously, that debt is a bond, and if you commit to debt, then you do have a very serious responsibility and commitment to the people who borrow you this money, and this is very important.
Absolutely. And so the question is, since we can work and produce with our labor and raw resources that exist, why do we have to be in debt to have a medium of exchange?
Well, but let us first establish, because this is before I answer this question, because it's not a complicated answer to give. My basic take is this: since we need credit, we might as well create the money as credit. It's as simple as that. And the banks create all the money today as credit, but then they slap this 5% on it. But we could also do this interest-free. Why not?
Absolutely.
I'm going to interrupt here, Greg, just a second, because, Anthony, I want to really think about and talk about what you just said. Because if you need money, and so why don't you just create the money as money, not as credit? We don't need any credit. We don't need any damn debts. What we need is the money available to us, and so we can make a profit and do things. And all expansion should come from profit, not from creating money that didn't exist before, which gives a special interest that was able to get that loan, whoever he is, gives him a terrible hand up on everybody else in the economy that can't get the loan. And you can't have justice that way. That's impossible. Go ahead.
But then then there is a contradiction with what Greg was saying, because Greg does have a reasonable approach to providing credit in the economy, because with the financial institution that he described, which I would call yuck banking, basically, because that is what's going on, interest-free saving, and these savings are then basically used to recycle as loans, which people need, because that is then the basic discussion that we have here now. Right? Can we manage without credit? And I think it's important. It's a very important discussion. I agree that when you spend debt-free money into circulation, that you will have a lot less need for credit, and that indeed, if you solve the money scarcity first, the economy will.
Anthony, I kind of disagree with Greg there too, because I wouldn't want the banks to do that. If you're going to do that, now I've done both. I borrowed from the banks and I borrowed from an uncle, and him and I made an agreement, and he didn't actually loan me as much money as he did actually loan me cows and tractors that he had that he didn't really want at that time and didn't have much use for them, and he had enough savings that he didn't really need the money, so he just said, okay, I'll give you the cows and you pay me so much, give me a percentage of the calves every year. Well, if I had a poor year, then he didn't get as much that year. If I got a 99% calf crop and I got them all to where I could sell them, then he would. Or 1 year, he even took the calves for payment. See, this is a whole total different world. I happen to have been very fortunate that I've been able to live in both worlds, so I know what it's like in both worlds. Yeah, and you couldn't trust a banker for anything. Right now, bankers are so mentally corrupt, you couldn't trust them anyway. No matter, even if they thought they could do that, then they'd figure out some way to do something and get an advantage more than they should have. Because that's what they've been taught all their lives to do. We got an advantage on everybody, so let's stick it to them. Well, you need to get rid of that, and that's why I'd like to see the whole banking system go away, because then you get this out of the minds of the people that these are the gods that you can just go there and get what you want. And Postal Service would just serve us. And and yes, you do. If you're going to have money as a number, which I have nothing wrong with that, there's going to have to be a way to help the people move it back and forth. But it shouldn't be anybody that gets a profit from it. And being our Constitution says that Congress could create the money and provide for post office and post oath, well, you could also pay the post office employees out of that newly created money as money, not as credit, not as debt. So then that could all be done. You could go get this whole transfer of money through this entity, just like we do the banks now, where we wouldn't have to pay a fee or anything. Now, this is true debt-free money, and it would stay that way. And if somebody was charging interest, well, then obviously it wouldn't take long that they'd quit that, because all I'd have to do is say, here's what he forced me to do to get the money. That makes the contract void and unenforceable. So now he ain't going to do that but once, because he'll lose. And he don't want to lose. He wants his principal back, and he's entitled to his principal back. Go ahead, anybody that wants to get in the conversation.
Well, the money would be an evidence of our production, of what we own, of what we produced, or our wealth. And that's what money, a medium of exchange, should be simply. And we don't need to be in debt to produce. And once you start putting debt-free money into circulation based on production, eventually, as you pay the debt out of the system, the cost of living is going to go down, your taxes are going to go down, your savings are going to go up, and for people, really, that's where investment money should come from, is from savings. But we're so far displaced from a world like that we can't possibly imagine that if we wanted to start up a business that we would use our savings. But that's how far away we are. But we can get there. But we have to start bringing the money into circulation, debt-free, earned, based upon production that benefits everyone. And that's the only way we can get it done.
And I want to interrupt here again because you make me think of it. This is a personal incident. I sat in the family in a home with 3 generations of people all at the same time. And the older folks said, well, when we got started, our families just set us up. They give us what we needed to get started, some land and some cattle and some equipment, and we just went to do. Well, then when we was able to help our kids some, but not very much, because, we wasn't able to ever get that profit ahead because of the banking system. Well, then the younger one said, well, we'll never be able to help our kids do anything. We'll be lucky if we survive now. And it wasn't long till one of them, there was 2 brothers there in that conversation, one of them, he just got out and sold everything, and the other one, in just a few more years, he had to file bankruptcy and lost it all anyway. And see, this is the thing, most of us have never seen what really used to happen. Because originally, the older family, the family just put them in business, helped them. wasn't no big deal. They had the money and savings to do it. And basically, that's what my uncle did. He had these things, and he didn't need them then, so he said, well, I'll let you use it, and you can pay me, back on when you produce more wealth using them. And he, in time, got all his money back. And see, this is a concept that we have. We've been so far along, and so few people have ever really thought about the consequences of having to have a debt-based money system. And I've talked to people that said, well, Byron, we don't want to talk about the consequences. We always want to just talk about how it could actually be done or not done. Well, you'll never get anything done or ever understand anything if you don't think about the consequences of what's going to happen when you do this or this or that. And I'll turn it back to you guys.
Yeah, because I really very much agree with what you were saying about how it used to be done, etc. And so much has been lost, and people. You're older, Byron. I think you've been around to see how it used to be, and especially in the country. But nowadays people are so isolated, and nowadays the economy is really highly urbanized and specialized, which is also not too healthy. And we need a monetary system that will allow us to claw all this back. And I disagree that the problem is the debt. The problem is not so much that. The problem is the usury on the debt, and that's a really very important distinction. And interest-free debt is absolutely not the same as an interest-bearing debt, and the amount of debt would simply implode if we would take usury out of the equation. And our goals are very much the same, and that's what I want to stress. Our goals are absolutely the same, and I very much underwrite the analysis of the problem that you are giving in terms of, the social fallout and et cetera, and I also agree that if you spend a lot of money into circulation and create an abundant money environment, that we will have a booming economy and lowering costs for living and rising wages, etc. But
okay, now we have a Jason, it looks like, that has a question. I'm going to bring him on if that's okay with everybody. Jason, are you there?
Yeah, hi. This is
okay.
Jason
Go ahead.
This is Jason from New York. Hey, Anthony.
Hey, Jason.
I just want to point out, Byron, I think you're misunderstanding that at the end of the day, there really is no difference between money and credit, unless we're talking about quote-unquote hard money. Okay. Hard money, which in my opinion is really nothing but a highly liquid form of barter. Okay, that's something separate. But if you're talking greenbacks, which is what I assume you're describing when you say that there should be no debt, so you're saying there should just be greenbacks, correct?
Well, wait a minute. Now, let me get you straight here. Greenbacks were a debt to the government. They weren't debt-free in any sense of the word. So most people don't understand that.
So when you're saying that money should be printed debt-free, what do you mean by that? So you're saying that money and credit are two different things.
Absolutely. Now let's start right here. Now, right now, we both understand that United States Treasury prints money, right? They print bills. We understand that, right?
They print interest-bearing debt. Is what they print
the actual piece of paper we use for money. Right. They print. Is that not true?
But it has to come through the economy through the Treasury bonds and through the
well, no, wait a minute.
Channels.
That's what you've been taught to believe, but that's not true. If they printed that money, they could spend it just as easy as they could sell it to the banks or do anything with it. They could just go spend it.
Okay, but that you're right. Technically, you're right. But in effect, that money, quote unquote money, does not come into the economy without going through the banking system. So.
Well, wait a minute. That's the way it works now. But if you're going to make change, you have to change how things are done. Right. So what we do is just simply change that. So now they print that money, and do bookkeeping too if they want to. I don't care what they do. But then they spend it to do certain things that benefit almost all the people. And the one thing that always benefits all the people is transportation, because you can't do commerce without it, and water. You can't live without that.
Well, Byron,
so if you do those things, and don't allow the government to do it just for whatever some congressman would want to do to benefit his buddies, but you do it something that automatically has to benefit the bulk of the people. And go ahead.
So the U.S. is a vast country, and are you saying that I think what Anthony is saying, and what I agree with him about, is that local communities should have the right to print their own money in the form
No.
of free credit.
That should come from the central source, but they should be the ones who have the right to make sure what it does. Because if you live in a city and that city needs new roads, you're the ones in that city that has the right to demand them new roads be built or upgraded or resurfaced or what.
So what you're saying is, for example, a small town in Nevada, okay, is going to be completely dependent upon the central government for its credit supply?
No. There won't be any credit, and they won't be dependable because they're the ones that have the authority to say, hey, we want this money spent here to build these roads for us. And we're not going to need the roads that you are going to need in New York because you're going to have to all them streets in New York, but you're not going to need in Nevada. So that money will go directly in to pay the people in that neighborhood who build them. Go ahead.
But what about a local rancher who wants an investment right now and who can't wait for, or doesn't want to wait for, the federal government the bureaucracy, which I'm sure if you have any dealings with the federal government, a central authority, it takes years to do anything. So that's why they have no say so. And yes, I've had a lot to do with the government, more than you'd even want to dream about. Well,
and I guarantee you, if the authority comes from the people to demand them to print the money and give it to us, and we only have the power to spend it for the things that we request and things that benefit the general population here in this community. Go ahead.
Well, all right, but I'm going to let you go, and thank you for letting me have a say. But I just want to make a request of Anthony, because I know he knows the difference between quote unquote hard money and credit, and why credit at the end of the day is no different than money. Hard money excluded. So Anthony, please. Well, now wait. Let's
stop and talk about that, and then I'll let Anthony answer that. Because hard money, I assume you mean gold or silver or brand or brass or whatever, right?
Yeah, sure. Mm-hmm.
But it's some sort of a mental, physical thing, right?
Exactly.
Probably made out of metal. Okay, Now do you understand that money was all created debt-free? And to prove that, let's go to the 1792 Coinage Act that clearly said in plain English, anybody that could find gold or silver in the ground could bring it in, and we would weigh it and assay it and stamp it into coinage free of charge. So I could, if I found some gold, I could take it in, they would turn it into money, just like we want now, the same exact principles, and then they would give it to me, and I would go out and spend it with no debt and no cost to anybody.
Right, but Byron, I'm not talking about actual gold or silver coming out of the government. I'm talking about just me walking into an old frontier western town with an ounce of gold, not coin, not minted by anybody, and going into a general store and saying, here is my ounce of gold. I want to purchase,
But now let's think about that, because you've got to have somebody to understand what that purity of that gold is. Because gold don't come out of the ground as pure gold. It has to be refined.
Right.
And then not only that wasn't really a fair system, because as I understand it, years ago, when they'd find this gold dust, and I had somebody buy a book for me and send me gold dust, so I know a little bit what that's like too. Okay, well then the bartenders would always find the man with the biggest thumb he could find to tend to the bar, because they'd take it and pay with a pinch of gold. Right. And the bigger the thumb, the more gold he got.
Right.
And see, you got to make sure your money is uniform throughout the entire system, not separate. My money should spend the same in New York or Minneapolis or California.
So
it's got to be uniform.
Ideally, it should be uniform, but that outside of legal tender laws, there are still going to be people who are in, it's a large country. You're going to have people in certain areas of the country who, for whatever reason, don't have a sufficient supply of the national medium, and it doesn't matter how you propose getting it out there. There will be points in many parts of the country where there will not be sufficient supply of this national medium of exchange. And
why do you think that's true?
Because it's always been the case.
No, I haven't seen it been the case. Every country I know, every person I know has ability to produce some sort of wealth.
I agree. Well, they traditionally, the private banks, their notes have served as the means of exchange in those far out places.
And we always have been in debt. Let's get out of debt.
Right, but at the end, like going back to what Anthony's statement is, the problem is not the debt, because at the end of the day, anything that's not quote unquote hard money is credit, because credit is defined as any form of deferred payment. And if you're holding a piece of paper...
But then why would you want that? You want your money to be the payment right now, right on the barrelhead. Do you know what, right on the barrelhead, I laid down the money and you picked up the barrel.
But okay.
See, that's what money should always be, and I don't care what form it is. It's book empty, whether it's paper, whether it's metal, it doesn't make any difference. The principles is what you want to talk about. Money is money. It's not anything else.
Yes, but here's the key that I exactly, you just brought that up, and I want to hit this nail on the head. Nobody holds the means of a piece of paper as an end in and of itself, okay? It's a means of exchange, and therefore it's credit. It's not money. You can call it money.
No, that's not true.
It's true. Do you hold...
It's either money or it isn't money.
Right. But credit and money...
Guys, let's get back
If the money represents what you've produced, now, for example, you have a body and you wake up in the morning and your energy is renewed, that labor in your body that you have, that strength is renewed, and you're not in debt for that, are you? And then you can go out into nature from rocks or trees or whatever's out there, the raw resources, and you can apply your labor to those things and create something. And you're not in debt for that.
Right, but
are you in debt for that? Are you in debt for that production?
But I want to keep my body for perpetuity. I am not looking to exchange my body for anything. I want to keep my body. I do not want to keep a piece of paper. I want to exchange it. Do you see the difference?
You're wrong. You're not using your body to make any exchange. You're using a combination, and this is what all wealth is, a combination of three things at the same time: your knowledge, your labor, and a raw resource. If you don't put them together and create something, you never have any wealth of any kind. So you monetize that wealth, not your body. Your body has nothing to do with it. Your body is where you get the labor from. And your head is where, your mind is where you get your knowledge from. And then the rest has to come from some sort of natural resource of the earth.
I agree, but what is it represented by? It's represented by some sort of ledger money, by some sort of piece of paper.
It wouldn't make any difference if it was represented by a number in a checking account or it represented a piece of paper. But see, all pieces of paper don't have to be notes. They can actually be the payment.
But you don't want
in fact, most of us use it and think about it that way anyway. When I go to the filling station to fill up gas and give them a piece of paper, I don't think about that I'm giving my IOU. I think about I've made payment.
Right.
Isn't that true?
Go ahead. I don't want to take time away from Anthony because he's the more knowledgeable guy. So I thank you for letting me come on and speak my piece, but I'd like to hear more from Anthony. Thanks, guys.
Well, I thank you for coming on, and forgive me because Anthony is very passionate, and I'm very passionate. That's why we want to. That's all this whole program is about: is trying to get these people together and express their ideas. And we want anybody to come in and express their ideas. Go ahead.
I'd like to express one idea before the show's over, and that is that if the money has to be a debt and borrowing in debt isn't a problem and we're not even going to charge interest on it, then I want to be the one that creates all the money, and I want to decide if Anthony gets any or Byron or David and all the terms. And if they don't fulfill my terms, they're not going to get the money. And they're going to be in servitude to me. And I don't know, I don't want to be in servitude to someone else.
Because that's really a very fundamental point, and it's really very crucial. And I agree I agree with it completely. Let me put it that way. So what you're pointing at is very clear. I mean, if you decide who gets the credit, we have seen what incredible power this in itself is to the banks, because this is a huge power to the banks, and people underestimate this completely. And this power would then go to the guy who would be doling out the interest-free credit. So is this a good thing? And this is a very legitimate question, and it's a crucial question. Everybody should be asking this question. And my answer to it is this. I'm in the business of creating interest-free credit because I design alternative currencies, complementary currencies, and I'm in the process of launching such a currency in the Netherlands. And in that currency, I'm going to be the one, together with some other people in my foundation, who is going to decide who gets the credit. And indeed, this creates a very uncomfortable situation. The only reason I'm doing it now is because nobody else is paying attention, so nobody realizes that it is actually a very important job, and that they should all be thinking about, hey, who do we want to be doing this job? But since nobody's thinking about it, I'm doing it now, and that's the only reason I am. And ultimately, these things must be organized in a decentralized way, and everybody that is going to pick up the gauntlet and start creating interest-free based credit-based currencies should be doing this from the idea, okay, I'm going to do this serving the community. I'm not going to do it for myself because there's not going to be any profit in it, and this should count for everybody who's doing this or is going to do this. There should be no profit in it, and the fundamental difference between a benign and a functional monetary system and the completely outrageous plunder operation that we have now, because that is what this whole banking thing is that the banks create all the money and the credit for their own benefit and for their own profitability and for their own long-term strategic aims, because they serve all sorts of aims in the social domains, in the cultural domains, in the political domains. I mean, they translate this power to all sorts of powers, and because it is money after all, and that is the power of money, that you create money and you can buy everything for it, including cultural and political influence. And the difference is that in a decent monetary system, the money is created for the benefit of the people who are going to use the money, and this must be done via a clear charter with clear goals, verifiable targets. In a transparent way, and this ultimately demands that people actually have an idea of what is at stake, so that they actually start paying attention to what is going on here, instead of thinking, oh well, the bank is doing it, or in the future, oh well, these guys from the interest-free credit facility are doing it. No, everybody should realize that this is really a core function in society, and that it is in everybody's interest that it is being done in a transparent way that is understandable to everybody, and in this way controllable and verifiable, etc. And this requires also a deep think about what money and credit is, and how incredibly central to our entire society it really is. And that is part of the revolution that we are looking for, because the money power and the banks have enslaved us over the last 5,000 years, and we are total slaves. And I think very few people actually understand how deeply and profoundly we are enslaved by this system, and where they are taking us. And until we start paying attention to this very basic matter and start realizing that indeed the people who do this, let's keep a good eye on them. And on how they are doing it, and for whom, and who's benefiting, because that is really necessary and part of what we need to go to.
Well, see, this is the reason I think that the huge difference between credit of any kind. The only difference would be if you use the word credit to mean you put it on the right side of the ledger instead of the left. If that's the kind of credit, then it's not in any kind of debt. But any other kind of credit is some kind of debt that somebody's going to owe somebody. And somebody's going to have the decision to make who's going to get it and who isn't. But if you put it in the way we're talking about, where they do something that benefits the whole community, when they build a road, upgrade a road, surface it. And you got to remember, like Jason said, the people in Nevada, who are a scarce population, aren't going to need as much money in that circulation, because there's not enough people to move it from one to another, as New York City does with a huge population. But at the same token, New York is going to need more upgrade. All roads wear out. They're going to have to be rebuilt and redone, and all the water systems that lay underneath the road and the sewer systems are also going to be that way. They're going to, sooner or later, in fact, we have that problem right now in Minneapolis. A lot of these sewer systems are 50 years old, and they've got to rebuild them somehow.
Well, if the government created the money and give it to the people in that community to do that, to rebuild the road, and at the same time put in a whole new sewer system and electrical system and everything, then all would get the benefit for that. And the money would go into circulation by people who actually worked and did it, and then they would get the paycheck and they'd spend it. And they'd go to the grocery store, and they'd go to the filling station, and they'd go to the massage therapist or whatever, where you spent your money, the bar or whatever. That money would move to all those people, and there would never be any debt in the system at all. And they wouldn't need it.
And they'd have a tax
and the taxes
break.
Yes, as Greg said, and as you said, about 40% of that is interest. So that interest would all go away, so the cost would go down immediately, 40%. Now the wages wouldn't need to go down at all, but the cost of the product would. And then taxes in this country is about 30%, so that would also, most of that, not all of that would go away, but a lot of it would. And if people have jobs, they wouldn't need welfare. So a lot of that cost would go away. And if you could actually save, and in our system we cannot save, because I can't borrow $100 and then spend and pay back $110 and have any savings at all. And if I do, somebody else has to lose the money. And see, these are consequences that most people never thought about. Go ahead, Greg.
You'd eliminate the fuel taxes right off the bat, and freight charges would go down therefore also. We could build solar into these roads and bridges and generate electricity that people could use for free for whatever we need electricity for, or even to charge electric vehicles as they stop at the rest stops and go down the road. But there's a lot of ways we could build these roads that would help us with a lot of the problems we have now, but we aren't able to build them the way we want. We know we can build them, but we don't have the money to build them until we bond for them or tax the people. And we can't tax the people until the people have first borrowed the money so they can pay the taxes. So you'd eliminate all that stuff, and I can't really tell you exactly what the world would look like, but it'd be in a lot better situation than we are now.
Go ahead, Anthony.
Listen, guys, I think we agree on the goals, and there are maybe some technical differences about how the money should be created, etc. And I don't think we'll manage to get through all the details in this show tonight. We do agree on the usury issue that it must go, and that the banks are really a ravenous lot, and that we don't need them at all, and that we really should get rid of banking altogether, and that's the main thing. So,
well, I think we absolutely agree on 99% of everything. No question about that. And this is why we wanted to have this show and do it, is because we need to get like you guys and us and other people together and actually talk about these things until somehow we can get a big movement. If we could get a movement demanding a change in the monetary system as big as the people have got when in Black Lives Matter, we could bring changes, and change could happen. But see, there's only a few of us that really care about how the money system works, because most people do not understand it and never have even thought about it. To give you an example, I had two young men come to my house the other day and do some work, and they came at different times and they left at different times. And just before they left, I asked them, well, you've showed me how to do a lot of things that I didn't understand. Now, I think I could talk to you about some things you don't understand. Can you tell me what a dollar is? And they just turned plumb blank. And I said, well, can you tell me how that dollar gets in circulation so that I can pay you? And they didn't have a clue. So I said, well, here's how it works, and I don't want you to believe me, because I have a book called Tales from the Treasury, that are letters that I wrote to the Treasury, and they answered it, and they say right in there that all money is created as loans. And the banks do that by simply adding numbers to the checking account. Okay, and then they say right in there, you may want to know who gets the benefit of all this creation of money. Well, the banks do, because they own all the money all the time. So then we ask them, well, where's the money come from to pay the interest in? And they wrote back and said, well, the money to pay interest comes from somebody else's borrowed money. And I said, now you think about the consequences of that. And they both left pale.
And I give them a copy. I give them that little book. I have them, and I said, because you've been here and done this for me, I will not pay you, but I will also give you these so you can understand why you have to have so much debt to have a car and to go to get a college education, or go to any school and get an education. And like I said, man, I really changed. They had entered into their minds things they had never even thought about before. And this is what we're trying to accomplish with this show, to get people all over the world to think about the consequences of allowing money to be created as a debt, as a liability to us, and an asset to the man who did nothing. And I think you were with us. I'm so thrilled that you came on the show today. I mean, it's a great chance to talk to people like you.
Well, we do agree on this. I can hear you there very well, Byron, obviously, and it's a great frustration, I think, for everybody who realizes how incredibly important it is that we address this exact issue, how money is created, the usury, the cost of usury involved, and how these bankers put us by the balls, basically, and that we really need to get rid of the whole thing and replace it with a much better solution, which is simply easily available for all of us. And that is what we should be working together to achieve this. And there are many people, I think, working all over the world in this direction. But the frustration of any monetary reform, that 99% of the people simply can't grasp it. Although I think slowly but surely things are changing here and there. At least the money creation issue is gaining more traction. Usury, unfortunately, not so much yet, but yeah.
Well, I think clearly it's some of the the people we got on the radio show called in. You've had a great impact, and we thank you for that. And we're glad that you're doing that, because somebody's got to do it, and somebody's got to get people to hear and think about it. And I just agree with you. Like I said, 99%. I just don't think that without debt you can't have any interest, so that just kind of solves the problem all right off the bat. If there's no debt, there can't be any interest. And that's where it is an easy way to solve that, just don't have the debt. But to do that, you have to have money that solely represents wealth and production of the people, not that anybody else in some way created for the benefit of somebody else. And that's the difference between credit. It means somebody somewhere is going to get a bite out of that, your production. And we just want it so when the production is monetized, then you get the benefit of it. Everybody gets the full benefit of that, and they don't have to give up some part of it to somebody else, in order. And nobody that I ever knew could possibly create all the things that they might want in their life. I know for a fact I couldn't create a telephone, and I couldn't create a computer, and all these things. But we shouldn't have to be in debt to have the use of those things. And if we didn't, then most of the cost would go away. Go ahead.
The other thing, Byron, without the debt, you don't have the interest, but without the debt, you don't have the servitude.
That's right. Nobody has any say-so except you.
Yeah, well, so the question remains whether we can do without credit. My position is clear. We definitely can't, especially not at this stage of the economy where we're at. But, I think what you guys are doing is just absolutely fantastic. And I think everybody should plug away at his thing that he's doing. And meanwhile, there are many other initiatives also going on now. You have all these complementary currencies that people are trying to create, and especially after financial meltdowns, for instance, in Argentina, you had a big financial crisis, and after that, in the early 2000s, they created a big barter kind of system on a national scale, and this really helped a lot of people, and I think that was a very important initiative, and I think that we can improve big time on these initiatives. I think that we can create complementary currencies that are even far more powerful than that example, and I think we should do that, because it's also a matter of power, and I mean, I think it's quite clear that the state is very much under the control of the moneylenders, and it's not really quite clear how soon we will be able to wrest away the state from these people. So we don't need to, because already we can create high-end currencies that can really alleviate the plight of small and medium business and everybody else in the economy, and we should. And I see it really as a very pervasive phenomenon, and therefore also the answers must be very, in a broad context and on many levels, and on every level actually, and also the spiritual level, because.
And Anthony, that sounds like that music coming on, and so the show is about over. And thank you so much for being with us, and thanks for all the callers.
Please visit our website.
Thank you so much.
wealthmoney.org. We would appreciate your support by purchasing the books and materials. Don't just purchase the books, but study the information we have presented, and tell others the truth of our debt-based system, the problems interest causes, and the slavery it promotes. Byron and Greg, thank you for your support.
Anthony, you still there?
Very much so, yes.
This is David. I had one more question before you hang up. In your writings, I've had this argument with Byron and Greg a few times. In your writings, you were talking about banks lending interest. Now, the contention we've had is, okay, why would a bank lend their interest profits back when they could create all the money from nothing to begin with? And you had made some comments on that, and how it could, you could actually stimulate inflation or deflation by doing that. And I was just wanted to get your opinion. Do you think, obviously, you said something that banks would be lending their interest profits back out again. Do you think there would have to be a coordinated effort with the banks, or do you think one bank could just do that by themselves and cause the inflation or deflation that they wanted to?
The banking system is one, and they all work together. And it's managed top down, and all these inflations and deflations, they're just created by the banking system as a whole, and it's coordinated from the very top through the Federal Reserve. And on even very high levels in the banks themselves, they are completely unaware of this because they don't need to be aware. The decisions about the amount of money that is going to be lent is centrally coordinated, and this is not speculation. This is really what's going on. And the banking system must be seen as one. You have all these different banks, but ultimately they do compete for market share, etc. But ultimately they are completely one in terms of their interests and the way that they manage credit allocation, the amount of credit, etc., etc.
Oh, okay. And then one other story
also, that they're all completely. That's just a cartel that is operating as complete one. That's mind-boggling, but it's a fact.
Okay, so you don't think one bank could just do it on their own if they wanted to?
I don't really think so, no.
Okay, and the other question, if you can answer it shortly, you had the three goals for monetary reform, and usury, of course, and and this artificial inflation and deflation, and the third one, democratize credit allocation. Can you explain that to me a little bit before the show?
Yeah, I was talking a little bit, answering Greg at some point in the show at the end, but I'll rephrase it a little bit. If you have credit, then there is the question, because obviously you cannot give everybody as much credit as they want, because the amount of credit is always going to be bigger, and so it has to be managed and allocated in a reasonable way so that you do not overheat the economy and create inflation and what have you. And meanwhile, you also have the problem of if you have only so much credit to dole out, who are you going to give it to, and on what grounds? And this must be done in a reasonable way, and it can be done in a reasonable way. Maybe not in a 100% satisfying way, but it can be done in a reasonable way. But it's very important that it is done in a reasonable way, and not with the idea, because the issue is today, banks lend only for the things that they want done. They do not lend what we want. No, they lend for what they want having done. So they give you big mortgages, and inflate the housing prices with that, and then deflate them and create all sorts of problems with that. You can get credit for that. But try getting credit for all sorts of business initiatives that really need to get going also, etc. And would allow people to start self-employment, etc. But you won't get credit for that,
So you would, like what Federer was talking about, the difference between loan capital and industrial capital. That would be what you're talking about here.
It's in the same direction, huh?
Yeah, okay. All right, Anthony, great show. Thanks for coming. Really appreciate it, and just wonderful having you. And, we talk about alternative currencies, and I know you got that one you're doing out there, and if we can get you back on and talk about alternative currencies, I'm sure that would be a good time, too.
Hey, that would be great. I would love talking more about that, actually. So, and I really enjoyed it, and, it's great work what you're doing, and keep it up. Keep it going, guys.
Yeah, you too, Anthony. Thanks a lot.
Excellent. Have a good weekend.
All right, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.